Hi, everybody. Jim Ostrowski back with the Liberty Moving podcast. I almost forgot how to do this. I haven't been doing it that often. So this morning I'm going to answer the $64,000 question. Why is there so much political violence? I'm not going to recite all of the violence. It's been going on, for a long time, really throughout human history, but specifically talking about the last, since about 2014, it appears that there's a resurgence of violence that we saw when I was a boy in the 60s, and they sort of calmed down for a while. Never really entirely went away. Seemed like there was more terrorism going on than like domestic type of violence that we've seen recently. And I'm not going to get into the Charlie Kirk shooting specifically. The official line is that it was left-wing violence. I'm prepared to believe that if the facts warrant that, but we really don't know. And we've been lied to so many times, and the government really has no credibility at all. So I'm suspending judgment on that and say hypothetically it was a left-wing act of violence. But this podcast doesn't really depend on what happened in that situation. There's been plenty of left-wing violence, both in the streets, riots, looting, shootings, school shootings, and so on. So there's plenty of data to go around on that score. I'm more interested in so why? So I'm not going to be a really long podcast. My theory is quite simple and really won't take me that long to explain it. So my view is that politics is dominated by ideologies, and these the main ideologies of our time, I think, in the United States, the ruling ideology is progressivism, and that's not leftism. That's sort of the government's going to solve all our problems-ism. It starts with Woodrow Wilson. It has antecedents going back to Alexander Hamilton and Abraham Lincoln, but as a sort of a permanent regime change ideology, it comes in through Wilson. There's a very clear chronology there I won't get into. So progressivism is the dominant ideology of the United States. It dominates both parties. Most Republicans are progressives. I know it's going to piss people off, but don't shoot the messenger, please. We've had enough shooting for 1 week. But there's also an ideology called leftism, which since 2014, since 2014 has, we kind of thought that leftism was going to be in the dustbin of history when the Soviet Union. But there was a resurgence of leftism. Signal interruptions, I apologize. Naturally. I'm not going to discuss, why there was a resurgence of leftism. There was a resurgence of leftism in the United States right around 2014 with the Ferguson riots. So these are the sort of predominant ideologies of our time, but there's other ideologies too. Conservatism is there. And in my view, many will disagree with this, but from where I stand, walk. To me, conservatism was really kind of a reaction to progressivism, the Woodrow Wilson progressivism. And it's kind of like, it doesn't fundamentally disagree with progressivism. It's just that it wants progressivism to go at a slower speed limit. And many people have pointed this out. I think it's an accurate metaphor. And not that Trump is the classic conservative, he's not, but if you look at his administration, you see this sort of a right-wing progressivism where they're going to use government power to solve certain problems. And I don't mean like the negative night watchman libertarian state of just keeping law and order, blah, blah, blah. That's a big myth and so on. It never existed and can't exist, but we won't go there in this particular podcast. But you see this sort of positive government action is going to solve problems. You see it in the tariffs, you see it in the deportations, and the response to crime and violence. Well, of course, we need more cops, and we need more judges, and we need more prosecutors, and we need more prisons. And I'm not going to debate the merits of that. But I am just going to state as a fact that these are instances of an ideology of progressivism. In other words, there's problems in society, and the government is going to take positive, aggressive action to solve those problems. So even I view conservatism really as a sort of a branch of progressivism. It's progressivism going in slow motion. Now, if you want to define conservatism as libertarianism, I don't know why you would do that. It's confusing as hell. Then, of course, my analysis does not obtain. But I'm really primarily focused on left progressivism because I think that's where you're seeing most of the political violence. But the analysis that I'm going to give in the next few minutes applies to, in my view, every ideology except libertarianism. I'll get into that in a second. Well, let me get into libertarianism now because I gave us kind of a tease for this podcast the other day through the whatever 50 or 100 or 300 people were listening. We got to make this thing go viral, don't you think? Because let's face it, folks, I've been right about everything for 40 years. I don't know what's the old joke. My parents got smarter as I got older. Well, hopefully J.O. is getting smarter as events unfold that show that I was right about pretty much everything. So go off. We go off on these tangents. So why is it that out of all the political groups, libertarians have these very strong beliefs, which are strongly held about the evils of big government, and yet why is there so little violence coming from libertarians? And I think that's a key to understanding this whole problem of political violence. Why are the libertarians, out of all people, noticeably nonviolent? It's hard to think of any examples of libertarian mass shooters, libertarian terrorists. I'm not going to get into the whole Timothy McVeigh thing, but even if you could say that McVeigh had some sort of vague libertarian leanings, okay, well, it's one example, and he wasn't really a hardcore libertarian. I don't believe a hardcore libertarian wouldn't commit a terrorist attack. Libertarians are not pacifists. We're not pacifists. But if a libertarian chose to, unwisely in my view, confront the state with violence, they wouldn't go after non-combatants. They would go after hard targets, as in war. Because terrorism, by definition, is against civilians. Like, if you attack a military base, in my understanding, that's not terrorism, that's war. So, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of it. In any event, that's how I'm proceeding with this analysis. So let's go through a little bit of broad sweep of history, and then we'll, I see my baseball park coming up. So I know I've got to get this out in the next few minutes. I know people are busy. I got a busy day myself. So basically, ideology kind of really comes in the early modern period, because throughout all of human history before that, you had what we call the old regime, which was just kind of the strong dominating the weak. Often it was sort of a feudal type system, but you had small numbers of people kind of grabbing power and organizing society for their own benefit, and it's basically based on brute force. And there wasn't really much ideology. There was, I suppose, this ideology of in Europe where the king was exercising biblical authority and all that stuff, and John Locke went after that in his first treatise. But ideology in sort of the modern sense kind of really just comes in with the libertarians in about 1650. And libertarianism, I think, is unique among the prevailing ideologies today. There's maybe about 10 ideologies. Libertarian's one of them. Leftism, progressivism, conservatism, fascism, Marxism, socialism, whatever. There's about 10. But I do think, and this is self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway, I do think that libertarianism is unique among the ideologies in that the libertarians really, if you study them, they're trying to reason things out using logic, empirical data, knowledge of history, to try to hammer out what they hope to establish as a sort of a true, political philosophy or ideology. I'm not using ideology in the pejorative sense. It has a pejorative definition. And many of the ideologies are stupid and deserve to be scorned and frowned upon. I'm just using it, ideology, political philosophy, kind of similar concepts are the same thing. But what about these other... Now, it doesn't mean libertarianism is correct. I haven't proven that on this podcast. But it does mean that it does say something about the attitude of libertarians, that they're, in developing their philosophy, they're trying to, you look at John Locke and Jefferson, these other people, up to Rothbard and me and all the other libertarians, we're trying to hammer out like some sort of a philosophically true case. We're libertarians are sort of, we joke about how libertarians love to have debates and seminars and academic conferences, and it's like we're sort of famous for this. And instead of like shooting people from towers and blowing people up, we're sort of famous and mocked out and lampooned for our obsession with policy wonkery, and we're trying to use reason to establish what's true about politics. And what about these other ideologies? And I don't have that much more time, and I know I haven't done a podcast in a while, so this is not exactly the quickest moving podcast ever, but I'm hopefully leading up to the grand finale. I got a few minutes left here. I hear the traffic from Hurdle signaling that I have to shut up at a certain point because I can't stand the traffic noise. So I'm going to give it to you straight. One of the major themes of my work, and I'm going to be putting all my work together in a way that people can see everything I've done since I was in law school, and I really first wrote my first article in law school. But one of the themes of my work, I have maybe 5 big themes of my work that kind of tie everything together, trying to extend the corpus of libertarian thought beyond what the people who taught me, and who are most of whom are now gone, created for the world. One of my themes is politics is a form of psychotherapy. Politics is a form of psychotherapy. I wrote a book on progressivism. I have a book outlined on leftism. These are not rational ideologies. They're not. The people who propounded progressivism never sat down. There were progressive writers back in the day. I can't remember the one he's cited in my book. I think he wrote for the New Republic back in the day. They never sat down and tried to prove that, Woodrow Wilson style progressivism was philosophically true or empirically true or controlled studies. They didn't do controlled studies back then. They said what progressivism was, like the content of it, but they never proved it philosophically, and nobody has ever proven it philosophically. And my approach, not to get into methodology too much, in Progressivism, a Primer, my approach was I wasn't like a historian of ideas. What I was in that book, and I think that's why the book works, I reversed engineered what progressives in 2014 thought and said and did. I took what they said and did and thought, and I explained what it meant. I wasn't being a historian of ideas. And I concluded through that process, ultimately, and I'm not going to summarize, I'm not going to go through the book here. I got like 3 minutes left. Progressivism, at its core, is a form of therapy. It's a form of therapy. It's a way to use politics and government to make people feel better, particularly the progressive, him or herself, wants to feel better about the world, so he creates this progressive regime. And none of it's rational, none of it works, none of it's totally irrational, totally illogical. But my point here is, it's a form of therapy. So, we talk real quick about leftism. So, leftism is different. Leftism is the belief that the government should use its violent powers to make everyone equal in every sense, including sexual identity. By the way, this transgenderism is that's why it's on the left. We're going to use the state to force everybody to treat everybody equally in every way. We're going to make everybody equal in material condition. So what is leftism? Is leftism a philosophical argument? It's really not. They may believe that equality in the leftist sense is what, some self-evident truth? It's not. In fact, equality is a horrible idea, except in some very limited instances. And I hesitate to even talk about, people talk about, I guess I'm going to go on a little minute here past, in my book, a lot of conservatives and some libertarians make the mistake of saying, well, I'm for equal opportunity. It's like, really? I'm not. Equal opportunity? What would that mean? I'm an attorney. My father was a judge. So to be equal with me, what do I have to do? Like, to equal out that advantage I have from having a father who's a judge. Jim, we're going to make you drink 3 shots of whiskey before court. So it takes a couple of IQ points off because you got that. Equality is a stupid idea. I'm not going to prove that here. It's a bad idea. Well, so what is leftism? If leftism isn't a philosophical argument for equality, it is not. Particularly when you reverse engineer it and find out what makes leftists tick, and I've been studying them for. Sorry, folks. Got to get a new selfie stick. So, but leftism itself, like its cousin progressivism, is a form of therapy. Because I'll give you my theory of leftism very quickly, and I think it is original. It may sound like other people's theories. Fine. This is my theory. I developed this myself. I guarantee you. I know where I got my ideas from. And they came from inside my head. Leftism is a form of therapy for unhappy people who blame their unhappiness on people who have more than them in some aspect of life, and they're responsible for the fact that they're unhappy, and we're going to use the state, we're going to make everybody equal. But really what it is a form of revenge or inflicting pain on people that the leftist blames for their unhappiness. It's a form of fucking therapy. So if you have an irrational ideology like progressivism and leftism, and really left progressivism itself is sort of a combination of the two. And what do you do when people, and I'm wrapping it up right now, what do you do when people disagree with you? You're not going to pull out your Aristotle or Plato and start arguing with them. You're not going to say, hey, you libertarians, you people love to debate. We're going to come to your next conference. I don't think I've ever had an actual debate with a progressive in my entire life. I've tried. They refuse. You can't debate a leftist. What? What's the debate? You're interrupting their therapy session. So here's my point, because I'm running out of time and park space. When these people don't get what they want, they don't argue, they don't engage in a Socratic dialogue. They have, and if you're not going to debate, if you're not going to use logic, reason, or fact, what other tool does a human being have? Guns, knives, and fists. So that's my wrap up. That's my conclusion. That in an age of where politics is a form of psychotherapy, when you interrupt the psychotherapy session of your opponents, it's very likely that they will respond with violence as opposed to academic seminars, arguments at the bar that libertarians themselves, who are remarkably free of violence, even though we care passionately about. Sorry, it's a little choppy there, but I hope I made my point. Thanks for listening, everybody.